Hi booktube, Aaron here. Hope you're doing very well. Today, I want to talk a little bit about my reading plans, about my reading habits, and about what my reading's going to be looking like over the next few months. I've noticed that over the last 6 months, maybe 8 months or so, there's been quite a lot of book hauls on my channel. And they've been relatively frequent. Some of them have been quite large. Um, and the sort of question in the back of my head, and the kind of worry that I've had has been whether the books are coming in faster than I can read them, and whether, if I were counting how many books I was buying in the year, would there be more books coming in than I'd read that year? Um, so that was a bit of a worry in the back of my head. Um, and just today, I counted the number of books in the house. About 3 years ago or so, when we moved in, we had about somewhere between 600 and 700 books, if I remember correctly. We counted the books a little time after that, a year or so after that, I think. And it was maybe more like maybe about 800 books, something like that. Um, Now there are 1,059 books. So since we moved into the house 3 years ago, looking at the number of books I read per year, I can definitely tell that on average, more books are coming in than I'm reading per year. Um, and so, well, even before I counted the books, I'd already decided that I wanted to go on a book buying diet. So I'll stop buying books for a set amount of time and focus on the books that I already own. So it won't be like the 100 book challenge or 500 book challenge. I'm not going to set myself a number of books to read. I'm not going to set myself a list of titles I need to get to before I can read any books. Instead, I'm going to set myself a time limit so that I'm not rushing through books that I otherwise might enjoy a lot more, just to get through them so I can get to that specific number. And so I'm not going to buy any books until the beginning of March 2025. So I'm giving myself 6 months to concentrate on reading what I own. A couple of sort of exceptions I've given myself. They're not exceptions to buy books, but instead, if there's a book I really want to read, whether for a buddy read or whether it's part of a series and I don't have all of the books, I can get it out of the library. In fact, this whole experience might be a great way for me to start using my library more, but also my Kindle. I can get stuff for free. If it's in the public domain, I can get it from Project Gutenberg and places like that. And so I can utilize that as well. But they're the only exceptions, and even then, I'm not buying books. And yeah, that's going to be it. I'm going to be focusing on reading the books I already own, and in a way, I'm hoping to see this as an opportunity. I wrote a list of just some of the sort of potential reading projects, some of the authors and books that I've been meaning to get to for quite some time. The list is is quite long, so I've got some of the books and authors that I put down there here. I haven't got all the books for the entire list. I won't go through the entire list because there'd be way too many books for me to show you. But I'll go through some of them just to give you an idea of just how many potential projects I could have. And this is just the physical stuff. It's not even, it's barely venturing into what's going on on the Kindle. So in the last book haul that I did, which will, fingers crossed, be the very last book haul until next year. Um, One of the things that was hauled was the Wolf Hall books by Hilary Mantel. So 3 pretty hefty books there. I've never read them. I started Wolf Hall many years ago when it was not long after it was released, I don't think, and wasn't really ready for it. And so that's one that I have plenty of time to sink my teeth into them. Another potential project would be to look at The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, a poem that I love and have read I don't know how many times. And I recently got a few Wasteland related books. So I've got this, it's a facsimile of the original drafts, and there's also a transcript of it as well. And so I can go through and sort of see what changes were made to it. So I'd like to go through this. A bit of an odd book to read cover to cover, but I'd like to read this and have the poem itself as well and make comparisons. The kind of thing, that I think is rewarded by slow reading. And then if I were to sort of dive into it in that way, I'd also want to read The Wasteland, a biography by Matthew Hollis. So a nice fat book about the history of the poem. I've been putting it off a little bit, as excited as I was to get it. And so that would be a great way to just dive in and live in the poem for an extended amount of time. Another planned reading project that I've talked about a little bit and have been slowly making my way towards is to make my way through the writings of Thomas Mann. I've read The Magic Mountain a couple of times. Earlier this year, I read some of his short stories, and I've got 3 of his novels that I have yet to read. There's his early book, the book that kind of made his name, Buddenbrooks, which I might get to next. I'm not sure. I think Classics and Company are going to be reading it next year, so I might save that until next year when they're reading it. But there's still plenty more Thomas Mann. I've also got Joseph and His Brothers, and I've got Dr. Faustus as well, which maybe I'll read later this year. This being the shortest of the 3, although I understand it is quite difficult. So plenty of Thomas Mann to spend time with. One that's been calling out to me for a while, and I'm not sure exactly how I would tackle it. I've got the works of Geoffrey Chaucer, so not just the Canterbury Tales, but also a lot of his other stuff as well. I could easily just put 2 months aside and read this as slowly as I wanted. And this is all in, the original. And there's no gloss, so it's not, it's not giving you much help at all. But there are notes and things at the back. But actually on the page as you're going through, you've just got the original Middle English, and I haven't read any Middle English, for quite a long time really. So I would have to take it quite slowly, but it would be a lot of fun. Another idea that's been taking my fancy is to sort of systematically work my way through all of Shakespeare's plays, and it'll be quite satisfying to read them in a set amount of time, whether in a year or over 2 years, and to just tick them off as I make my way through. So that's something I might, if I'm not buying loads of more books, then I might feel suddenly a space opening. Because that's the thing, so some of the books that I'm showing are books that will have turned up in book hauls recently. And that's the thing, when new books are coming in, some of them I read, some of them are put on the shelf for a later date. And then I'm distracted, and I suppose a lot of this is about, instead of being distracted by all of the possibilities that are out there, all of the books that I don't have yet, there are still loads of possibilities still in here. Here's another one that would, I think, make quite an interesting reading project. This is The Western Canon by Harold Bloom. He's going through many of the books that he thinks are sort of, I suppose, worthy of being celebrated. A lot of the sort of cornerstones of Western literature, just fighting with the receipts. And what I think I'd find quite interesting is I could go through this and I could sort of work out which of the books that he's mentioned here that I've read, and then sort of compare what I think to what he has to say about them, and then any that I haven't read, if I have them here or if they're in the public domain and I can get them for free on my Kindle or through the library or something like that, then I can read them and again compare notes with Harold Bloom, see what I think. What else? There's the opportunity to read authors that I just have been meaning to get to and never have. Well, I suppose with this one I have read a little bit, but not a lot, and that's George Eliot. At the moment I've got Middlemarch here. I've got Silas Marner, and I've got Daniel Deronda, none of which I've read. What else do we have? Roberto Bolaño. Both of these tomes I've got. 2666. I think the only book I have with don't know what you call it when is it a setback cover? Yeah, I'd really like to get to that at some point. And I've also got his poetry. This is The Unknown University, and he wrote a fair bit of poetry, and it's one that I've been putting off because of its size, and I want to give it time and sort of jump into other things at the same time. It's kind of similar to that thing with The Wasteland, about sort of immersing yourself in the poetry of a certain poet and then sort of reading around it a bit as well. I've got the major works of William Wordsworth here, and it might be interesting to read that. And I've got this biography by Jonathan Bate, Radical Wordsworth, and so I suppose this is mainly concerned with his earlier life. I suppose I'm intrigued as to whether there would be a follow-up, a reactionary Wordsworth. But again, that would be an intriguing project to see what he has to say, and then to sort of read the poems from the period that he's writing about. What else is there? There's some short stories as well. That there are plenty more collections of complete short stories, collected works, things like that. But I've got the collected stories of Ernest Hemingway here that I've sort of dipped into, but would like to approach a little more systematically. And we've got the complete stories of Edgar Allan Poe, and again I've dipped in, but like with the Hemingway, I'd like to approach a little more systematically. And there's the Tale of Genji, a massive book. How many pages is this? Yeah, it's about 1,200 pages. So similar size to War and Peace. And just a couple more. This is one of those cases where it's an author that I've enjoyed in the past and have just kept meaning to get back to. I've bought other books by them and I just keep getting distracted. And it's Laszlo Krasznahorkai. So these are the 3 books of his that I own and haven't got to yet. We've got War and War, which is a collection of sort of this is about a guy looking for what's he trying to do? He's writing something. Anyway, it sounds intriguing. If I read it, then I'll do a better job of summing it up. The World Goes On. This is the one that's sort of interconnected short stories. A lot of them sound quite odd and surreal. And then there's Satan Tango as well, which I've heard quite a few booktubers talk about, and it sounds really interesting and really odd. And then the last one I've got here, and there's plenty more that I could have pulled from the shelves. This is one I started, and I was reading it at the same time as Proust, and it just wasn't working. And so I decided to put it to one side, and I thought I'd catch up on it a bit later on, and then never did. So I'll probably have to start at the beginning again. And it's the poem Lyric Sign Meter by Don Patterson. And this is 3 essays that he wrote about what a poem is. I think he was trying to just re-ground himself in poetry, and he was trying to work out exactly what he was doing with poems, what makes a good poem, and to make sense of all of that, he wrote these essays, which are really in-depth. Some of the most technical writing on poetry I've come across. So I don't think it's the kind of book for someone who is sort of vaguely interested in poetry. It's definitely for someone who really wants to get their head under the bonnet and actually see how it works practically. So that's another reading project that would take a lot of time. How long is it? It's about 600 pages. I think there are notes and things in the back, but just shy of 700 pages. And I've read longer books. I've read longer books of non-fiction, but that would take time. I'd have to go at a snail's pace to really make the most of it. And so that's just a rough idea of some of the things that I'd like to get to. This certainly isn't a checklist of the things that I want to get to between now and March. If I knuckled down and committed myself to these books, I could probably read all of them between now and March, but that's not necessarily what I want to do. It was more just a chance to give myself an idea of the many possibilities that were just waiting on my shelves. When I counted all of those books, the one thing I didn't do was count how many were read and how many were unread. I think that would have been quite intriguing, but it might be something I'll try and do. Maybe in March, maybe I'll count up the books again. Hopefully there won't be an increase in number, and I'll see how many I've read and how many are there that are still unread. I don't mind there being unread books on the shelf. I think that's part of the fun. I like having possibilities there, but it needs to be manageable. Luckily, it hasn't yet got to a point where I have no idea what books I have. It's still it's still quite easy to have a sort of mental catalogue, at least for me. But I'd like to know maybe at the end of this how many I've read, and sort of what proportion, what the ratio is between read and unread. I'd hope that it somewhere between 60 and 70% of the books I own are read, although not all of them are mine. So we'll see what it looks like. But I thought I'd just let you know what I'm planning to do, um, and I'll maybe make progress reports or something. I'm not exactly sure how to make progress reports about this kind of thing. Um, but we'll see how it goes, and hopefully, having made this and talked about it is a way of keeping myself accountable as well. And yeah, as I said, we'll see how it goes. Yeah, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.